I'm Alan, and this is Shadows and Shamblers.
Please stand as you are able for this week's reading, which comes to us from the Book of World. Sometimes the old ways are the best. There's nothing like a knife in the back. Now you may be seated. So this week we watched American Gods Season 2, Episode 1, The House on the Rock. What did you think, Alan?
I thought that The House on the Rock would have been the perfect ending to the first season, but they used it as a way to introduce us to a cast of new characters for this season, give us a little bit of fan service right up front, and that really worked for me in a way that I was kind of surprised about. There's definitely some issues, but overall, like this premiere of the new shows, that showrunner situation managed to retain a lot of my confidence. What about you?
I definitely agree with you. I think it felt a bit more like a season finale than a season premiere. And that actually makes sense given that when they had plotted out their plan for season 1 originally, this was supposed to be the season finale of season 1. And, not a lot happens plot-wise. There's basically just two things going on. But there are some great character moments, glimpses of new characters that I'm really excited to get to know better. And we kind of have to reestablish, what was going on 2 years ago before we can move forward again. And I agree, it looks really good, it feels very familiar, and that's pretty comforting given all of the showrunner drama that happened. I was kind of worried that we might get a season 2 that looked or felt really different from season 1 in a way that felt very jarring. So a little bit about this week's creators. This episode was written by Jesse Alexander, who is the new showrunner for most of season 2, who is replacing Brian Fuller and Michael Green, the showrunners from season 1. Alexander broke into Hollywood by writing the screenplay for Eight-Legged Freaks, and he's been a writer and producer for nearly 20 years. Neil Gaiman also has a teleplay credit for this episode, and he helped run the show this season after Alexander was kind of exiled, from the project unofficially. And this episode was directed by Christopher Byrne, spelled with a Y and an E at the end. And he was the second unit director on the first season of American Gods, and so that probably explains why the visual aesthetic is actually so consistent. And yeah, so I guess we do need to talk a little bit about all of the behind the scenes drama. So not only were the showrunners from season 1, Brian Fuller and Michael Green, gone, but a lot of the bigger name actors who were on the show were basically working on the show because they were friends with Fuller and Green. And so both Gillian Anderson and Kristen Chenoweth left the show after Fuller and Green also left. And apparently Gillian Anderson was going to do a tribute to Carrie Fisher as part of her role of media. Oh, I know, I'm so sad that we didn't get that.
Man, that sucks.
Yeah, and if you're gonna replace any character, Media is the one that you really can replace, right? Because every time she appears, she has a completely different guise. So, I'm not saying that Gillian Anderson is, eminently replaceable as an actress, but in terms of continuity on the show, replacing whoever the actor is that plays Media, it causes the least amount of friction.
Yeah, I think most of the friction is happening behind the camera. And it's always possible to get Kristen Chenoweth back. She says no right now, but maybe when her character is important later in the story, they'll be able to negotiate something,
I did love the throwaway line about how she decided not to show up because Wednesday ran over all of the rabbits and was acting like a rabbit racist. And, as someone who is impersonating a fictional character who hates rabbits on the internet, I will firmly join the rabbit racist parade or whatever.
Nice.
we'll put some links in the show notes for like, whatever drama exposés about
Mostly
what was
rumors.
going on. Yeah, mostly rumors. In particular, there was like a Den of Geek article that I thought had some pretty good insights.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the one review that you linked me to, I think the reviewer, he seemed pretty negative on this episode, and actually, like, maybe it's just that my expectations were a little bit low given all of the drama and intrigue, but I was actually very pleased with the episode.
I agree with you. Yeah, it was a little bit too harsh. We'll throw that one in the show notes too, and people can let us know what they think.
Mm-hmm. So what happened this week?
This week, the technical boy rushes a wounded Mr. World to the secret bunker of the mysterious Blackbriar Project. Meanwhile, the old gods converge on the house on the rock so Mr. Wednesday can warn them about the new gods. Shadow joins the old gods on the carousel that transports him into Odin's feast hall, where he inspires them to earn the worship of human beings again. Afterward, Mr. Town is ordered to attack the gods as they feast in a hotel diner where he kills Zariah Vechinyaya. Shadow tries to stop the attack, but is mysteriously abducted, and Laura watches helplessly as his light fades further and further away.
Dun, dun, dun.
For real, right? We get a nice little cliffhanger at the end of this thing.
Yeah.
And it kind of contrasts with the opener of last season where Shadow was captured but got bailed out before the episode ended. But that doesn't happen here. So I really liked this whole thing with Mr. Wednesday talking to the old gods. Like, not only are the special effects pretty fantastic, and I think they did a really good job with them, but the actual, like, what's going on here. Mr. Wednesday has gone and, like, kicked the hornet's nest, and now he's telling everybody, like, they're going to be coming for us. You better get on the bandwagon because the war is happening. And what he gets in response is a lot of people dragging their feet and wanting to kind of put their heads in the sand and stick with the status quo. And it just reminds me so much of like the kind of current political climate. Even when we can agree on what's happening, you have to like just reach out and like peel people's eyes open and be like, no, look, fascism right there. It's right there. Please pay attention. And that is like literally what Mr. Wednesday is doing, trying to tell people they're going to kill you. And then the response is, well, why don't we wait and see if that happens? And it's like, yo, wake up. So I really appreciated that. I feel like it resonates in a way right now, like with where we're at politically, with where America is right now, in a way that's really interesting and is really different from the book, where when Mr. Wednesday gives this speech, the gods have every right to say, no, we should wait and see because nothing has happened.
And wait, so what's the difference?
At that point in the book, you've only met the technical boy who gives Shadow a scary speech, but nothing really happens. He's not hung from a tree like he is in the show. So the show has shown like a lot more antagonism between the two sides at this point. And what Mr. Wednesday is saying is like demonstrably true. It's objectively real in a way that makes anybody denying it look absurd. But I appreciate that because not only is it more dramatic, but I feel like it reflects reality a lot better.
I see. Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying there, because in the book version of this, they have more plausible deniability, whereas like here it's like there is no plausible deniability. It's just like trying really hard to be in denial because you're a coward, or like being manipulated by propaganda in some way.
And it's a whole nother thing too when you've got Bilquis there being a narc.
Okay, I was a little bit confused about that role. I don't know how much she's being a narc versus just like being used unwittingly, or like, I mean, okay, so obviously she is bought into the new gods' proposal that, you know, the old gods use technology to get their worship, and she's on board with that. But I don't think she was buggy in the room or anything. Like when Mr. World was looking down on her, I didn't get the impression that she necessarily knew she was being watched or knew about that the massacre was about to happen. Because Mr. World says, I need her to feel complicit, which I think indicates that she felt like she was going there with a peace offering to try and like persuade them to come to a peaceful resolution, and not that she was sort of like there as a spy for the new gods.
Interesting.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
That was my reading of it, at least.
Yeah. Because Tech Boy sends her at the end of the previous season when he has his really bad hairdo.
Yes, I remember that one.
So yeah, I read it as she has her phone out in the diner and it's like sending the signal. But I guess you're right that there's nothing that says that she knows it's going to be an ambush.
Yeah, and like from what we know about Mr. World's capabilities, like he doesn't need her, you know, and with Project Paperclip or whatever, you know, he doesn't need her. He can figure out where they are and target them.
So it's more about manipulating her than it is about like needing her to be there to do anything specific or triangulate their position or anything.
That was my read of it.
That's least interesting. I really like that. Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's just because I like Bilquis as a character and I don't want her to be a narc. But I think at least at this point, you can definitely read the text that way if you want to.
I'm convinced by your argument. Maybe Bilquis is not a narc. I'm very suspicious of people, so she's like, I was ready to blame her for this.
So in the book, is she not there just because she's like not powerful enough to be on Wednesday's radar?
There's like the Jin's not there either. Like a lot of the Coming to America characters are not there.
I see. But I can see how like in a book Neil Gaiman wouldn't necessarily want them to be there, but in a TV show where it's like, you know, people aren't as good at keeping track of characters and they've gone to all the effort to hire these really good actors. It's like you want to use the actors and keep the audience feeling like they have a relationship with these characters.
Yeah.
In a way that's different on a TV show than in a book.
Totally. And these actors have to eat, right? They can't just show up for one episode and be like, thanks, you know?
Yeah.
They got to come back. Yeah. And it's cool to see the Jin and Salim like see each other again. I was excited about that. So
yeah. So while we're talking about Bilquis at the diner, I was really intrigued by the way she kissed Laura, particularly contrasted with how the kiss between Shadow and Laura last season, where like if you recall, she's been like sitting in the warm bathwater and she really wants the kiss to be this like magical moment for the both of them, and then when they do kiss we can see that it is a magical moment for Laura. It like restarts her dead cold heart for one beat, and then the next episode when Shadow is talking to Sweeney, we find out that like it was actually not that way for him. It was kind of, you know, like kissing a dead person,
right?
however gross that is in your mind, like that's how it was for him. But I don't know, like Bilquis seemed to actually enjoy the kiss and Laura seemed to enjoy the kiss more than she expected to, and so I'm curious like how much of that is just like Bilquis trying to put her whammy on Laura the same way she puts it on everybody else, or if she actually feels some kind of connection with Laura, or I don't know.
She's fascinated with Laura, it seems like.
Yeah, and not disgusted by her at all.
Yeah. I read her as a narc, and so I was like, oh, does she think that Laura is a god and that she's going to like, hey, why don't you switch teams? Like, we'll become buddies and then I'll convert you. That was kind of how I saw it. And then the kiss, I was like, this is weird. Like, I don't know what to think about this.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot in this episode that I think is just like a little bit confusing. And actually, so I watched it the first time with my roommate, and he, at the end of it, he was actually wondering if like Wednesday had somehow set up the whole massacre as a way to motivate Chernobog. And I don't think there's a lot of evidence for that in the text. Like, Mr. World definitely seemed to think that he was pulling the strings. Yeah. But it's possible that Wednesday maybe anticipated that it was a possible outcome and had planned for it in that way, you know, where it's like, if he doesn't massacre us, then we win. If he does massacre us, then we also win. I mean, that's kind of like the hallmark of a good plan, right? Is that you're prepared for any contingency.
Yeah, that seems more like Mr. Wednesday. Like, this thing happened and we lost somebody, but I'm going to spin it to my advantage. It's weird because like when you know a text really well and you watch it be adapted, and then you notice all the ways that they are using it. And so that scene is really weird for me to watch because the curse that Chernobog lays down is from the book, word for word.
Oh, really?
But it's really late in the book. And the character that he's laying it down on is the same character, but it's like, this context is very different. What I sense is like some behind the scenes pressure because Cloris Leachman, who plays Zariah, is like in her 90s. And
I know. Actually, it was so funny. So as I was watching it, like when we first see her, when they're like sitting in the antechamber to the carousel, and I was like, man, like that actress is so fucking good. But when you're working with actors that are that old, like you got to be careful or you're going to end up in a Dumbledore situation,
exactly.
You know? And like, and I was just saying, like, I really hope, you know, she makes it through the end of the series. And then at the end, I was like, well, forget what I said earlier. None of that matters.
That's one way to do it.
They solved that problem. Yeah.
Yeah. It solves the problem. And then it at the same time, I was like, they're kind of fridging her to make Chernobog do this thing, which is annoying. But at the same time, like, I get it. And, you know.
Here's my follow-up question to that. Now that Zariah Virginia is dead, does this mean that the bear in the sky is going to escape and wreak havoc on everything, or are we just not going to revisit that?
Oh, that's interesting. Because that was like their job, right? So
right.
Does somebody have to pick up...
Her job is to watch in the morning.
Right. Does somebody have to pick up the morning shift now?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if we will... the book does come back there, but I don't know if the show will. That's all I'll say about it. You know, okay. It's one of the interesting things, though. Like, I keep mentioning the book, and I don't mean to make this like a comparison because I really like that the show is not like the book. I probably wouldn't do a podcast about it if it was just a straight up adaptation of the book, because I really like having this information about the book, and then that information is not useful for predicting what will happen. Or they just actively use it to be like, nope, it's the opposite. Like, that's cool to me. So.
Well, and it does seem like some of the tension that was going on behind the scenes and was resulting in the showrunner shuffle was that tension between, like, how similar do we want the show to be to the book. It seemed like Neil Gaiman maybe wanted the show to hew a little bit closer to the book than Fuller and Green were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently also, like, the actors were even rewriting some of the scripts. Like,
yeah, I think part of that too was that they didn't have enough Writers Guild writers to make it like you have to work with union people when you're, you know, like a major studio. Mm-hmm. And Orlando Jones, who plays Mr. Nancy, is also a union writer. And so he
Oh,
was,
I didn't realize that. That's awesome.
yeah, he was qualified to, they were like, could you write this? Because, like, literally that will make us be able to pass the union standards. So, yeah, that's weird to ask a union actor to do that on your show like that. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Like, maybe he's a really good improviser and a fantastic actor. I continue to enjoy his portrayal of Nancy, which is weirdly probably the most controversial part of the adaptation. That the strongest critics of American Gods, their go-to argument is that Nancy is so different from how he was in the book because he's angry about racism. And it's kind of like, hey, that was an oversight in the book and not like a miscalculation of the show, right? Like, it's good.
Yeah. I love his character on the show, and getting ready for season 1, I read like the first third of the book, and then have not finished it since then because I kind of want to not know exactly what happens at the same time that I can make some comparisons.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to imagine Nancy without that.
I mean, everybody reads in the book as being coded white, like everybody, even though they're textually not. And so it's really refreshing, I think, to have, and Nancy is not as old in this adaptation either. Orlando Jones reads as youthful. I mean, not like young, but he has a lot of energy.
Yeah, I loved the like creepy spider eyes on his forehead in the behind the scenes.
Oh, it's great. Yeah. Yeah, backstage, I really liked how they handled that. And like technically all throughout season 1, all of Shadow's dreams are also happening backstage. But this way that we see the gods and the effect that they had, on their eyes and all that stuff, I thought it was great.
Yeah, I was a little worried about that in the same way that I was kind of worried about the Bilquis coming to America aside. Where it's just like, okay, like, how are you going to pull that off visually? And I thought they did a fantastic job. And in particular, not just the visuals, but I thought the music, which is always fantastic, did a really good job of giving it that, like, super surreal flavor.
Yeah. Yeah, last season, Brian Reitzel, who does the music for a lot of Brian Fuller's projects, had that really distinctive style. And this season, it's different people, but they continue to have that experimental tone and really like kind of seamlessly, I thought, carried over that feeling from the first season.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask that because I hadn't looked to see if the music was the same person or not. So it's interesting to know that it's not, but they're kind of successfully imitating it, at least.
Yeah. I don't know their work. It's actually like a team, but when I looked them up on IMDb, they're extremely busy. They do a lot of projects, and it says on their IMDb page that their speciality is like experimental, weird sounding music. And I was like, good pull. That's perfect.
Yeah. So I think besides the idea of sort of like having to herd cats to come to their own political defense in the face of authoritarian fascism, the other big theme in this episode, I think, is the house on the rock as like a source of power. And I thought it was kind of interesting the contrast that Neil Gaiman is making between like how people respond to like naturally occurring places of mystical power in the US versus in other places in the world. It's a very European-centric thing, right? But he's talking about like cathedrals and churches and Stonehenge as being built on these places that are sort of naturally magical, powerful places. And in the US, the way we respond, like we can sense that power, but the way we respond to it is a little bit differently. Instead of building cathedrals, we build roadside attractions. Um, and I know like a lot of this book, I think, was inspired by Neil Gaiman traveling around the US and, you know, his curiosity and imagination being piqued by just all the weird little ways that the US is different from the UK.
Yeah.
And sort of like his view as a British outsider. Yeah. And so you actually went to the House on the Rock last season.
Yeah, it's a trippy place, and they obviously shot on location for this episode. And yeah, I'm glad that you brought up this whole House on the Rock thing as like a source of power, and because last season during like our analysis of everything, you would come up with this idea called the Tinkerbell hypothesis, and it was like basically that people believe in things, and because they believe in them, they kind of like the gods manifest because of human belief. And this is like a wrinkle in that idea, because it seems like there's an inherent power to these places, or to the, you know, geographical location that has an effect on humans, and then they respond to that. So it's not that the people believe there's something special. It's that there's like another force exerting something on them. And then this is a place that is good for the gods to, I don't know, like charge up or something.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about them as being kind of like contradictory theories of power, that there are just like pre-existing sources of power, and then also power can be independently generated by human belief.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know. Yeah, it's like a chicken and egg. I don't know if the people are making it or if the place is making it. So, but it's, you know, something to think about with the hypothesis.
So my reading of it is that it's not just the people are making it. Like the people might be enhancing it by being there, but there is something about the location itself. And I think part of that is just, it is like a quirk of Neil Gaiman's personal experience of being like, why is there a bat house here where there are no bats? Or whatever. I went on a work trip to Australia, and it seems like Australians have like a very similar strain. They also have a lot of weird roadside attractions in the middle of nowhere. So like, I don't think the US is necessarily unique in that. Like maybe it's something about British ex-colonies.
Oh, maybe. I mean, this makes me think of, I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, but it makes me think of this temple in Anatolia called the Göbekli Tepe. I think I'm saying that right. It's, well, it's not in English, and I've only ever read it. But the temple dates, you know, radiocarbon dating says that it's from 10,000 or 11,000 years ago. So it's pre-agricultural, and it's like a circle of stones that have engravings on them. And each stone is like 10,000 tons or something like that. Like,
whoa,
very heavy rocks, and they are fitted into the ground and stone masoned in ways that, you know, previous to this dig, archaeologists didn't believe was possible for pre-agricultural societies, or like, you know, who would spend the time and effort on that when you have to range for food?
Yeah.
But it's solid evidence that human beings don't prioritize survival as a part of our existence. We prioritize meaning. In the same way, like the creator of the House on the Rock starts building on this land that he doesn't even own, and adds to it and adds to it, and just builds this absurd, bizarre thing that is not just about making money, but is about expressing something about his interests and his experience.
Mm-hmm.
That when you walk through it, you feel like you walked through someone's imagination. It's just like, kind of, at least to me, what life is about. as opposed to going to any of a number of cathedrals that might be beautiful, but also cookie cutter-ish and like a Christian McDonald's, you know, like you've been to
Oh my
one, you've been
God.
to them all.
Did you just ruin cathedrals for me?
I'm just saying, you know, like they've all got the same pictures. I don't know. Like,
It's like Jesus, Jesus, Jesus.
right.
You know, so I've never been to the House on the Rock, but I have been to, there's this place in San Francisco called the Musée Mécanique, which is, imagine the House on the Rock, but without all the, like, architecture and trees.
Okay.
I think it's like the world's largest collection of, like that fortune telling machine.
Oh, okay.
These, like, mechanical devices were really popular, I think, in like the late 1800s, early 1900s. They've assembled this like amazing collection of them, and it's like an arcade, and they all cost like a quarter to play. The House on the Rock kind of reminded me of that, and that there's something also about like the human propensity to build these just like, you know, little mechanical games or, you know, little shows, you know, 20-minute show that you can play with a quarter.
It's so weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I spent like a good $15 on just coins that I put into all of those clockwork little vignettes and like the room where Zariah is sitting and she wants to listen to the music is like a room where you put a coin in there and the entire room like lights up and all of these instruments start playing from like compressed air machines that start blowing through the horns and the violins all move. It's wild. They're all out of tune and it sounds real bad and you're just like, whoa, like it's crazy.
Well, she does say, I want to hear the music. It's disgusting.
Yeah, it's so weird.
Which, again, felt kind of like a callback to in season 1 when Shadow kisses the youngest sister and she says it's disgusting, but in a good way.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So I liked that. And it made me glad that I did a rewatch recently because I was like, oh, I see what you're doing there, show.
That's nice. I like that.
So, okay, yeah. So getting us a little bit back on track. So Nancy, I think it was Nancy, who likens the carousel to like a spinning prayer wheel.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, like, do you think the gods are gaining literal power that's going to help them long term in the battle from riding the carousel and being on that meeting? Or did they just need the carousel's power to go backstage and Wednesday wanted them to be discussing the war while they were like in their true or more godlike forms as like a subtle move to remind them of their own power? Or like, what do you think is the strategy behind that besides, you know, like, I guess if you're gonna have a meetup of gods, you should do it someplace that's not just like a Holiday Inn conference room?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure that I have a smart enough answer for it. Maybe a little bit of all of that, right? I think certainly Mr. Wednesday on some level needs Shadow to be there and to see this.
I see. So it's not really about the gods. It's about really finally cementing Shadow's belief and faith in everything.
Yeah, like you called him a faith battery for Mr. Wednesday last season. And I think this is part of that because it seems to physically transport him backstage and he is able to watch all of this unfold. And then Shadow steps up in a way where he kind of closes the deal, you know, and tells the gods, like, you need to earn the humans' trust. Like, this is your chance to get back in the saddle.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, and then my final question about this is, why is Sweeney not invited back? Is it because leprechauns aren't real gods? They're just like...
Oh, shit. Some discrimination.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I'm trying to think, was the Jinn there? Because he would be like on a similar level.
Oh, I mean, he was definitely at the House on the Rock. I don't remember if he went backstage or if he was just the bouncer.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about. Maybe it's that Wednesday really dislikes Laura, and Sweeney is like wrapped up in
Laura's
Laura.
BFF.
Yeah. And so he's like, nope, you're not invited.
I mean, no, it is true. Like, Wednesday hates Laura because he killed her to get her out of the way, and she's like a wild card that, you know, Shadow has ties to and could potentially be loyal to instead of just being fully loyal to him.
Exactly.
And Sweeney has this connection with Laura, and Sweeney is also like constantly talking shit about Wednesday to both Shadow and Laura. So, like, clearly there's, like, some animosity there. But, yeah, it felt like a little bit of a weird move. Like, if Wednesday is trying to keep Sweeney on his side to some extent, like, this doesn't seem like a great way to do that.
Right.
Maybe it's just that, seeing Pablo Schreiber as Sweeney with those glowy eyes, like, it just doesn't fit with his character.
Oh, that would be weird. Now I'm trying to imagine what it
I
would
know,
be like.
right? Like, he's not dignified enough for that.
Or if he doesn't have his coin, like, would he just look like himself?
Oh.
You know?
He can't go on the carousel because Deadwife has his coin.
Yeah. Maybe. There's definitely a snub that happens because he's pretty salty about it. In the book, you know, to bring us back to that again, Sweeney's not there. That might also be part of the reason why. Because, like, they had to bring him to the House on the Rock because it just wouldn't make sense given the events of the previous season. But if they're trying to get back on, like, closer to the book, then they leave him out of this scene because he's not in the book.
Gotcha.
Maybe. You mentioned that I had gone to the House on the Rock. And, of course, when I was there, I made sure to go to Esmeralda, who gives you a prophecy if you give her a coin, like they do in the show. If you want to read my prophecy, go follow the show on Twitter at Shadow Shambler, and I will post the prophecy. Everybody can read it, even though the prophecy is private.
Ooh, I'm excited. I want to know what it said.
And if you've gone to the House on the Rock and got one, respond with it. I'd like to read those too. Yeah, so there is kind of an important thing that happens early in the episode that I wanted to touch on real quick because I think this nicely sets up the kind of conflict that we're going to have this season, I think. So right away in the episode, we get this scene where Mr. World seems to be like badly injured and gets taken to this secret bunker. And the way to get in is to show them a paperclip. And so I was like, why a paperclip? And I was thinking about it. And Mr. World mentions Operation Paperclip, which was a real thing that happened in American history. That is like,
really?
Yeah, it's a touchstone for conspiracy theorists where at the end of World War II, you had all of these scientists who worked for the Axis powers who were really good scientists. Certain elements of the government didn't want to just throw them in jail or have them executed. Rather, they wanted to exploit their intellect. And so even though they were Nazis or they had even contributed to programs that made them war criminals, all of that was pardoned and they were granted citizenship and given new identities so that they could work on projects like NASA's rocket program, which culminated in the moon landing. Like literally.
So I did know that one of the reasons why our space program was so good was because we just like took all of the German rocket engineers at the end of World War II. But I did not know it was called Operation Paperclip.
Operation Paperclip, yeah. And this is like a thing that, you know, conspiracy theorists kind of latch onto and go, see, this proves it, that, you know, the government does this kind of shady stuff. and therefore my whacked out ideas are real. And so in the world of American Gods, those guys are right, because since they believe that those whacked out ideas are real, they are real. And the result
I see.
is Blackbriar, this thing that Mr. World goes down into and starts to take control.
Oh my god. You just blew my mind.
Yeah.
So this is like the Tinkerbell hypothesis, because the conspiracy theorists believe that it's true.
It is
true.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And this
That's
is
cool.
This is a big part of the book. These are kind of like Mr. World's foot soldiers. And we already met one last season, Mr. Wood. And in this one, we get Mr. Town name dropped.
I did really love that intro sequence on the golf course where the guy gets run over by the limousine.
Party. Yeah.
Yeah, just like purely from a like visual and like fun little mini storytelling perspective. I thought it was a great way to open the episode.
And it felt like the old show, right? Like it was like, oh yeah. I also noticed when he was in there, he told him to turn on the eyes of Argus. And I was like, ooh, Argus is that giant from Greek mythology who has 100 eyeballs all around his head. And
ooh.
So he's like the all-seeing creature of Greek mythology. Who knows if it's actually Argus's eyeballs they're using? I'd like to think so.
They've just been harvested and implanted at various locations.
Yeah. Who knows?
So should we talk a little bit about Mama G, because she's the like main new character that we get, or like the new character that we get the most about.
Right. She has a speaking part.
I mean, she also gets her own work montage, so.
Oh, right. Okay, so is that the hotel where they were at?
I think it's the same name as the hotel they were at, but I kind of just assumed that it was like a chain.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. But anyway, yeah, so Mama G, who is played by Sakina Jaffrey, who is a fantastic actress. If you haven't watched Timeless, then shame on you. You should be put in prison because you contributed to it being canceled, in my opinion. Go to jail. That show is great, and it's a crime against humanity that stopped. Anyway, Mama G is Kali from Hinduism. Maybe American audiences would be the most familiar, unfortunately, with Kali from the second Indiana Jones movie, The Temple of Doom, where the bad guys sacrifice to Kali by ripping people's hearts out.
Thank you. No, thank you for connecting those dots.
Kali is a very violent death goddess. Hinduism is very complicated. I know that I always say that whenever I talk about any of the gods, because I feel bad for summarizing, like an entire person, like an entire religion into a couple sentences. But it's weird that Mama G is like the voice of reason here, so to speak, because Kali is never the voice of reason.
As one god of war to another.
Right. She's like, let's go bathe in some blood. Let's go chop some heads off. Like, let's do it. And
I love that that's a woman, though, or like a female deity.
Yeah. Hinduism has this cool aspect where every deity has kind of like two genders assigned to them, and they manifest as married couples, but really they're the same person. So Shiva is the god of destruction, and Shiva's wife, Parvati, she has like another aspect to her, which a lot of the gods in Hinduism don't. They're just like very whatever they are. But she has this other aspect. It's kind of like the Hulk to her Bruce Banner, that is Kali. So when you get Parvati pissed off, she is going to go bust some heads. So she's extremely powerful and filled with like anger and strength.
And so is she in the book?
Yes,
Or is she new? Okay, so she's not just new for the TV show.
this whole thing is like almost word for word, which again has always struck me as like, that ain't Kali. She wouldn't do that. If she was Parvati, like I would buy it, but
I see. That's funny though. So they kind of like they fixed Mr. Nancy a little bit, but they didn't update Cully.
yeah.
Even though they had the chance, could have made her less reasonable.
But I think in casting Sakina Jaffrey, who is like a fantastic character actress, that indicates to me that we will see more of this character. I really want to see her Hulk out. Like, I think that would be cool.
Awesome. Yeah, maybe I'll have to check out Timeless since I'm one of those terrible jailed people.
No, I'm sorry. You'll be going to jail, and they don't have Timeless there. Timeless is great. Everybody should watch it.
So for season 1, we tried to wrap up each episode by highlighting one way that the show surpassed the book and one way that the show failed to live up to our expectations based on the book. And this time we've decided we're just going to generalize that to sort of one low point and one high point. So, Alan, what was your least favorite part?
I really just liked in this episode that the technical boy shows back up after he's been sent on his quest to go find media, to like, he's just kind of standing next to Mr. World at one point, and he's like, are you really going to do this? Are you going to do it this way? And I was like, what? Why are you here? And why are you like criticizing your boss? Like, aren't you supposed to be out there doing your thing? Like, it threw me out every time that I watched the episode. I really don't like it. And I mean, I like that actor. He's doing a good job, but it's like unnecessary and distracting.
Mm-hmm. He's another Brit masquerading as an American, right?
Yeah.
Did I make that up?
No, he is. And I think Laura is, and Shadow is, and like nobody on this damn show is American.
Is American, even though it's called American Gods. I didn't realize Laura was British too.
I might be wrong about that, but I just saw an interview with her recently, and she had an accent, and I was like, really? Oh. Like, you too? Yeah, so that just really like stuck out to me. How about you? What stuck out to you?
So it was hard for me to come up with one, but the one thing that just really annoyed me was when they're in the car, Shadow's wishy-washy answer about his belief in mermaids. Because that was basically my pet peeve of season 1. If you remember me complaining about that, was that I feel like every single episode there's one point where Shadow's like, I don't know, do I believe? Do I not believe? Like... even though I like just saw something really crazy happen in front of my face, and it's like I know that like Shadow's faith is supposed to be a major theme, but it just, in the show, it felt like it was sort of like posing the same question every episode, and then we would come down on the side of like, oh, like Shadow believes that he caused the snowstorm, and then the next episode it would be like, it never happened. And so, yeah, that was just kind of irritating for me. It's like, really? Mermaids? Literally, your dead wife just tried to grab your hand, and you're like, mermaids? Who knows?
It's true.
I don't know. And I think that's something that is less irritating when you watch all the episodes in a row. Because, like, I'd recently binged most of season 1, and it was definitely less annoying. But yeah, that was my least favorite part. What about your favorite part?
I really like that when they go into the carousel and they're like in Mr. Wednesday's mind, or whatever that means, that the gender split of the gods is more even than in the book, because it's like a sausage party in Odin's head.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And also in the book, it's all about that all of the gods are old, like they all have white beards. And so that's an important theme in the book about like the ageism in America, and how like old people are discriminated against simply because they're old. But the show has really like moved away from that completely, like, which is fine with me, because what it has replaced that with is that it feels much more about people of color. So like when we get Kali, There's a Chinese goddess that shows up, Mr. Nancy, Bilquis, and Shadow himself. It really feels like you're getting a coalition of people of color here who are being told, like, hey, the regime is out to get you. Like, please wake up and fight back. And that feels much more relevant to me in our political climate right now. And it's a more interesting theme for this show to be chasing. So I really appreciated that. What about you? What did you like?
I had so many little favorite parts because the moment-to-moment work in this episode I thought was just really great. If I had to pick one, I think it would be the conversation between Nancy and Shadow about how Shadow reminds him of Nancy's stupid kid. And how like Nancy is clearly trying to piss Shadow off and like antagonize him, and Shadow basically manages to just sidestep it in kind of a clever way by, you know, saying like, oh, you're comparing me to your stupid kid, but like I'll take it as a compliment because it's a member of your family. And so I like this kind of like verbal sparring and the way that Shadow managed to impress Nancy in that moment. I thought the dynamic between them was really fun.
Definitely.
And then, yeah, I liked the whole bit with the fortunes and the way that each character like went up and took their turn with the fortune machine and had like their own little meaningful interaction with it. And then Sweeney was like, fuck that, I'm not getting a fortune. Like, I'll just break the machine, it'll explode. Yeah, and I really liked how, like, in the opening moments, they kind of, like, show the passage of time just by, like, casually moving around where people are sitting in the car without a hard cut, even really.
Yeah.
That was, like, some really nice, subtle visual storytelling. I also really liked the moment between Bilquis and Celine and the Djinn.
Right.
Where she's like, do you boys need a moment? And it's just like, that's like one of those jokes that I think, depending on who's delivering that line, could be construed as like kind of insulting and homophobic. But given what we know about Bilquis and her background and like who her past partners are and the one woman who she has had that particularly strong connection to, instead it feels like we're all part of the family, like
right.
Moment of kind of solidarity.
Yeah, that's great. I should point out that the reference to Mr. Nancy having a stupid kid and also the mermaid is an Easter egg for the sequel book to American Gods, Anansi Boys.
Cool. I think that wraps us up for this episode. I'm Anya, and you can follow me on Twitter at StrangelyLiteral. That's strangely, then LITERL.
You can follow the show on Twitter at ShadowShambler and read the prophecy that I got. Visit our website at shadowsandshamblers.com.
And join us next week for episode 2, The Beguiling Man. And join us on Sunday night for a live tweet with the hashtag Shamblers. And don't forget to rate and review the show on iTunes.
Because we are the original good time that was had by all.
Shadow and Shamblers is a Hollowed Ground Media production and is released under a Creative Commons non-commercial share alike license.